All right, here we are. Welcome, Gervais Hagerty, to the Lowcountry Book Club. We are so excited to have you.
Well, I can't tell you how excited and grateful I am to be welcomed into your community. So thank you so much.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you. And I loved this In Polite Company, Gervais' debut novel, which she's going to tell us all about. I know many of you have had a chance to read it, and I have questions from the group here. Gervais is a member of the group, so if you have other questions, you can put them in comments and tag her. Be sure to tag her, and she will get to you when she can. All right. So first up, Gervais. And first of all, I love your name.
Oh,
And I'm
thanks.
sorry, is that a family name as well? I know
Yeah,
you.
it
Yeah.
is. It's part of the French Huguenots
Ah.
that settled here,
Hmm.
and so it's kind of a family name. Kind of how you do it. You just give a last name as a first name.
Right. Right. I
The
love that.
tradition around here.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
So, Rebecca Kendall would like to know, Gervais, you've had such a varied career path: reporter, producer for TV and radio news, and a professor with an MBA from the Citadel. And now you're sitting on a few boards in Charleston and are a published author. I'm wondering when you decided you wanted to write a novel and how your careers have contributed to Impolite Company.
Wow, what a insightful and thoughtful question. So yeah, I've had a lot of different careers, and I didn't even realize I wanted to be a novelist until about a few years ago when I started this book. Actually, it was maybe even like 6 months into writing the book because it all began with my grandmother, and that was the inspiration for the novel. And I can go back to that, but to answer her question, my varied career path, everything I've done has definitely helped me. And Susan, I was just speaking to you earlier just about the kind of complexities of being a writer. I'm just trying to go for book two, and it's more than just writing. And I'm so grateful for have to have been out kind of swinging my elbows in the world of business and trying to get what I wanted in other arenas, because I've certainly had to fight pretty hard for what I wanted in this one. And then all of those different experiences play into my writing. As you write what you know, or at least that's what I do. And so my experience as a news producer, uh, shocker, my main character is a news producer. And so that was like a fun setting to put her in. And this next book I'm working on has a Citadel cadet, which is where I was a professor. So I like to think all of these little experiences I've had have definitely come to play. I'm grateful for them. And I'm also glad I've had a varied path because I can always draw on that to write
Hmm.
from. I mean, I'm 41 now, so I've only really started this career, like a year and a half, 2 years ago. So I have 39 years of a lot of experience and not so great choices
It's
to
it's
pull on.
helpful. It's helpful to have that
Yeah.
pool to kind of draw on. You have to have
Yeah.
something to draw on, some experiences to write about. So
Right.
yeah, yeah.
It's a deep pool.
Of course, you know Charleston like the back of your hand, but I wonder if any parts of the setting um, are fictionalized. Battery Hall, in any of that is fictionalized, or is all of that real?
I would say all of the places are real, and that is the feeling that I've been given or I've
Mhm.
received or felt when I was in that space. So I spent a lot of time on Edisto Island as a teenager, and in my 20s I'd surf on Folly Beach, and I grew up on a little alley behind Rainbow Row. So I
Mhm.
really do know Charleston intimately. Battery Hall is a representation of the men's clubs that I've seen around town, but I would
Mhm.
also like to say I wouldn't limit it to Charleston. And I think also I want to be careful that we all tend to separate, and that does seem like a natural human drive. And I'm questioning, is it good? Is it bad? I don't have the answer, but it's something that I've noticed here quite a bit. And my family, the men in my family have been in these organizations, and they've been like, Gervais, would you like to go have lunch at the yacht club? Which is definitely one of the ones that inspired my writing. And I'm like, I think I'm going to hold back for quite a while before I go back in there after what I wrote.
You think that perhaps some of those folks have read your book?
I do. Charleston is a polite city, and I do think that's both good and bad, and that we tend not to say everything. But
Right.
also, if you have the basis, like the agreed upon way of communication, that it is polite discourse, you can welcome a lot of ideas that way. So
Right.
that is good. So in that, I don't think they would necessarily tell me that they didn't like the book or what I said. I was at one of these events. I was at one of these men's clubs, and a man came up to me, and he's in local yokel, is what we call him, and he's like, "Well, those didn't ladies didn't like your book, but I thought it was. I mean, I understood what you were trying to do." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I don't know. I think like I realize this book, not everybody's gonna love it, and I think I'm just as a writer, I guess you just have to like grow okay with that because I'm trying to
Right.
say something, and when you try to say something, like I mean, even my husband and I don't agree on everything, and so that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you're never going to write anything that everyone is going to love. No one book is everyone's cup of tea, and I keep saying that over and over in Lowcountry Book Club because we do have a free exchange of ideas. And first of
Mhm.
all, everyone that I'm aware of loved your book.
Oh,
This is not about your book,
yeah.
but there's always going to be a book that any given reader doesn't care for, and so you can't really write your book trying to please everyone because you'd
Sure.
never get a book written. So
Sure,
anyway,
yeah, absolutely, I agree, and, I've also been picking up books that I don't tend to like, but that are getting rave reviews, global, awards, and I'm like, "What is it about these books?" And it's funny, a lot of times, like,
yep,
I mean, one of them, I mean, I won't name it, but I remember thinking like, "Wow, the writing really is beautiful, I just don't like the story."
right.
I'm in the minority on that one, and so it really is a personal thing, and I think just, like, letting it go, and I'm just so glad that I've had the opportunity to have one come out, and it's been in the hands of other readers, and thank you so
Mhm.
much for sharing it with yours. Yeah.
Oh, we had a lot of fun with this book, and actually we discovered it like right when it came out, and a lot of us read it then. I read It's been a while since I read it
Uh-huh.
actually because I read it then when it came out. I wasn't going to wait, but then of course we wanted to have you in and chat and have everyone make sure that they read it. So it's kind of been a we've had two timelines with this. So some of
Yeah,
us it's been a while since we read it, but
yeah.
just wonderful things about the book and in the group in discussion when it first came out and recently as well. Um, okay, so we talked a little bit about the setting. Of course,
Mhm.
Charleston's one of our favorite settings in the Low Country Book Club, and we talked
Right.
about parts of it that are a little fictionalized or sort of a composite or whatever. But now let's talk about the characters. How
Yeah.
much of you is in Simmons? Not necessarily her story or the things she went through in the book, but her personality, the core of who the character is.
I mean, I like to say, "Oh, it's fiction," but, it's a coming of age story, and I think a lot of what that book was for me was trying to answer the question, "What the heck happened in my 20s? Like, what was all of that?" I
Yeah.
just been through a lot of big life changes, and just kind of those concepts and ideas poured out of me. I will say in earlier drafts that I let my sister read. I've got two sisters, and one actually she's just reading a draft of this other book that I'm sitting at. She is a good reader because she does not hold back. And when she read an earlier draft, she was like, "I don't like Simmons. Simmons is she's too self-absorbed. She's too judgmental." And I was like, "Ooh," so and maybe some of your readers still see that, and I know some readers do, but I actually pulled back quite a bit on that. I'm like, "Oh my god, does that mean I'm really self-absorbed and judgmental?" Ah. So anyway, she and I definitely really identify with her the most. But writing the other characters was such an interesting project as well because I think you have to be a little bit of all the characters. Like I think I really had to understand what like a very traditional male role within the South abroad family unit, just to really understand that and be that. And it does make sense to me. It is what I grew up with to just write what the father would say, or
Hmm.
Martha is the friend, kind of like the frenemy.
Martha. Yeah.
Martha. I love that face. I love that I get a reaction. Um, and Martha, it was sort of like the Simmons could be really naive, and Martha was the one who'd seen the world a little bit,
Hmm.
and just so I mean, I think I'm like a little bit Martha too, or
Did
maybe. yeah, I would kind of wanted to be like her sometimes because she just knew what
Did
she wanted.
did you have a friend like Martha?
I think I've had friends like Martha, and I'm not proud to say it, but I've been a friend like Martha. Yeah, I think like yeah, so it was that was an interesting concept to me, I think especially in your 20s, and now I'm like I said, in my 40s, I'm like, in a full buffer decade in between. But I think that's one of the first time you realize that you don't have to y friendships have seasons, and that's okay.
Right.
And that was something I think it's kind of hard to learn when you're in your 20s, or at least that was for me, like, oh, just because it worked really well for a while doesn't mean it's always going to work.
Right. And sometimes you get lucky and you have friends that are your friends for life,
That's so
the
true,
and
yeah,
some people do and then other
right,
people, don't. And sometimes you have
yeah,
friends for a season and then other
mhm.
times, maybe they come back into your life later and then you can reconnect. And
And it's so important to keep that door
yeah.
open
Oh
too,
yeah.
and I am so lucky. Another thing about growing up here and just being here for generations is that, I just have this, like, thick web of I've just had friends. I'm so spoiled because I do have friends I've known for decades.
Right.
And so it was, a little confusing when it didn't always work out because it's a relationship, right? Like, you kind of expect it with, like, a boyfriend or a partner that they would eventually cleave, but it was confusing to me that that happened in friendships as well. So that's something I wanted to explore.
Yeah, well, you did a great job of it.
Oh, thank
And
you.
that was well done. But Martha, I mean, I really I did not care for Martha that much.
Uh-huh.
I was kind of rooting for Simmons, of
Yeah,
course, and so
yeah.
I thought Martha was not good for her. But
Mhm.
what do I know? The
Oh,
thing
you're
I
right.
think the thing I think trying on these different personalities and writing about these different characters does is it helps you to feel empathy for lots of different people and lots of different situations. And
Mm.
just in the same way, reading about different people and situations helps you to feel empathy for them. So, writing sometimes is a little bit of a revelation for me, anyway. So,
Oh, yeah, that's so true because you have to understand their motives,
right,
and it does make me at least less judgmental as well, just like, "Oh, okay, that's why they did that." I mean, a lot of times, like, we don't understand why people do what they do. I mean, I even think a simple analogy is just driving the car and someone honks their horn and you're like, "Why are you honking your horn? You're crazy." But then if you could see what it was, we
right,
just don't see it. We only see what we see in our own little,
right,
blinders. Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
So, okay, now let's separate Simmons' journey from, Simmons the character. So the journey that she goes through in this novel, realizing she no longer loves her fiance,
Mhm.
changing careers, the family dynamics. You mentioned your grandmother. Are these things autobiographical, or are they based on something that happened to someone you know, or is it sort of a combination of those things, or is it just made up of whole cloth?
No, I would say it's fairly autobiographical in that sense. So I lived away from Charleston for about a decade, and I was in college, and then I lived in California and North Carolina for a little bit, did some traveling, and I married my college sweetheart, and then it didn't work out, and it was just really sad, and we broke each other's hearts, and so I was 28, and I'd moved back home to Charleston, just licking my wounds, and suddenly I'm back on the dating scene, and that was really shocking to me because I didn't realize what a gentleman my ex-husband was. I just been he was my first boyfriend, and then I like all of my 20s I was just with this kind human. And that was a real shock to me to see the darker underbelly of the dating scene. And I've always just been interested in that male female power dynamic. And as women make progress in the boardroom, but like what happens once that bedroom door shuts, and where does that
Mhm.
power tension fall back to? And then the other thing that was really affecting me at that time in my life is I had moved back and I was working as a news producer and reporter. I wanted to volunteer my time. I had extra time and I was working with Big Brothers Big Sisters for a while, which is great. And you give a 2 hour a week promise to a kid. And so I was doing that for about a year and a half. But then I noticed my grandmother, she was about 80 in her early 80s. And I was just thinking, what if I gave that time to her? Like there's so many needy kids and that's such a great cause. But like I just want to just that's my family and I want to be with her. And so I just kind of moved my dedication for a period, and I really started to get close to her. And as I'm thinking about, these relationship dynamics, and then I'm also looking at her life and rooted in a very traditional marriage. And as she became more infirm, and we would go on these dates, we'd go out to sushi, we would go hear bluegrass, like we would go out, and granddaddy didn't really approve. And that made me want to take her out more. And I was just like, what are all these things like her life could have been? And it sort of became an obsession. To be her buddy, and we just became really close. And I like I know if we were born at the same time and we were little girls next door, we just would have been the best of friends.
Oh.
She was so curious.
Mhm.
Anyway, and then it was summer. It was a summertime when she was in hospice, and that's when I was a professor at the Citadel for quite some time. I had summers off, and I was just heartbroken. I was just so sad that she was dying, and I was also angry that, it was the end of her life, and I really wondered what it could have been. And so it
Mhm.
was these sort of concepts that were just churning in me, and I didn't know what to do about it, so I just started writing. So that was the beginning of the novel, just not setting out to write a book. It was a catharsis.
Right.
And, that was about in 2016. That was exactly in 2016 is when I started writing it. Mhm.
So the history with the ballet, is that her history, or is that?
So that's totally made up, but this is
Mhm.
a fun time for me to talk about my mentor, who is Mary Alice Monroe. She really helped me out a lot. I was working, it was about 2018 when I had finished the book. So I'm full time, I have two young children, but I have summers off, and I would work on this book just on my breaks. It was just fun. And then for about a year, I was going through my old emails. I didn't know Mary Alice, but we kind of had a connection. And I just would ask her like, "Hi, would you like to meet for coffee? Hello, can I pick your brain?" All the things that authors like writers do to try to get, And I think like maybe I just bugged her enough for about a year. And finally, in January of 2019, she said, "Meet me for coffee," and we did. And I handed her my manuscript, and she read it. And I know now, like just in my little teeny bit of having been a published author, like I've been approached by people. So like I can't imagine the number of requests she has. And for her to take time out of her busy day to read it, like I'm just so grateful. And so we met back at her house a couple months later, and she said, "You have a voice," which was good. And she said, "But here's the problem with your novel. That that Lottie character, all she does is die. What is her backstory?" And you were like, that was it. Like I just had this catharsis and these feelings, and that's what I built for Simmons. But she's like, "You need to give her a backstory." And my grandmother was a really beautiful woman, like really, really beautiful. My aunt Susan wrote a poem about her that was framed on her house. They lived in this beautiful house on Legree Street, which you're sure you know about. And the poem goes, "Some moms have this, and some moms have that, but I've got a mom you can whistle at." And, yeah, it was real cute, and it was just, like, always framed next to this little lamp in their living room. And so I was thinking about a backstory for my grandmother. She was never a dancer, but because she was just this, like, elegant, beautiful woman, I could really imagine that. And in high school, I took some classical ballet. I don't like modern dance, but I'm just a sucker for, like, Swan Lake. I don't know what it is. Like, I mean, I have a tattoo, but I love the tutus and the point. I just think it's
Oh.
beautiful. So,
So wait, now what is your tattoo of?
oh, so it's, well, this is what I gave myself when I turned 40 over COVID, and I couldn't have, like, a launch party for my book because 'cause we've all been
Oh,
there. But the tattoo, it's, let's see if I can it's of, the way my daughters wrote their name when I turned 40.
I love that.
It's really sweet, but then I also showed it to one of my buddies right after, and he's like, "It looks like you got a prison tat." I was like, "Oh, yeah, it kinda does." But anyway, I was just, yeah. So anyway, that was kind of how it got started. I really could imagine her, and I needed to give her a backstory that had some sort of parallel that would be a charging force, sort of like a light for Simmons
Mhm.
to run toward. And so that's how it ended up. But it was all because Mary Alice was like, "You need to give a backstory." Oh, and she said, I said the idea of the ballerina, and she said, you need to give her Capezio shoes. And I was like, great. And then I ran home and I Googled, what are Capezio shoes? And the first ones that came up were like a flamenco shoe with a little strap on the ankle and a
Mhm.
heel. And I could easily imagine her walking around with a little kitten heel. But I only later found out that Mary Alice really meant the slippers, which totally makes sense. But that's what's fun about writing, just like, the gift is like that nugget, like that perfect solid idea. You're like, I
Mhm.
can take this and run with it. And I really owe Mary Alice for that. I'm very grateful.
She's amazing. Okay, so Barbara would like to know. She said just finished the book. I loved it. Do they still have coming out balls in Charleston?
Yes, we do. We definitely do. And I myself am a former debutante, despite I don't know, my hair is kind of out of place and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we do. And I think it's such an interesting um, celebration because it's rooted in the patriarchy, right? It's rooted in the fact that years ago, like, a woman's best chance at a good life is a good man. And
Right.
so how do we parade her around and find her a good suitor? So we throw these parties. But, as the modern days have come, it they kept the tradition, but we're not expected. I mean, even when I did it, which was in 2003, you're not expected to go find your mate. You either meet him at college, or you and I are both having earbud problems.
Yeah.
um, yeah, so they really do. They're still there, and it's really cool because it's just a celebration of the young women in
Mhm.
that particular uh, society. And you do wear a wedding gown. There is a receiving line. You do wear a glove past your elbow. There are rules and manners. The balls have different rules, but I do remember one of them where I had to have two escorts, and I was never allowed to order a drink by myself at the bar. Like, you had to have an escort do that for you. And at first I was like, oh my God, where are we? But then I was like, you get it for me. Sure. I mean, I don't know. It sounds kind of fun. So yeah, it's they do their annual, and I guess there are about a dozen debutantes a year. I mean, I haven't been to one since my youngest sister debuted, probably in 2000, I don't know, 8 or 9 or something like that. But yeah, they are around, and it's just different now. It's definitely not an expectation to find a mate. It's just a
Right.
celebration. It's just a bunch of parties. It's really fun.
So Fran also had a comment about the balls. She
Yeah.
said, I enjoyed the book. I was not a debutante, but many of my friends were, and I've always enjoyed the dress shopping and festivities. The book brought back some fun memories. I even went back through old pictures. And then she said, I hope DC works out for Simmons. So we have a
Oh,
few of the,
that's so
and we have
great.
more questions about Simmons
Sure.
and her future here. But
Yeah.
Kim says, I absolutely love the early reference to the statue in White Point Gardens. If the statue had known what was to come, she might have invited the Union troops in for tomato sandwiches. Lovely line. Are there other Charleston area statues, murals, public art pieces that you'd thought about coming to life, or sort of, I'm going to say this word wrong, anthropomorphizing? I don't use that word enough.
Anthropomorphizing, is
Yeah, I
that
don't
right?
use that word enough.
Okay,
I
yeah.
should have practiced saying it. But anyway, she wants to know if you have had these ideas about other works of art.
Well, I think it is interesting, how, when you live in a city and just everything fades in the background, you don't really pay attention to it. In
Right.
fact, I didn't even know about the story. I would just play at the base of that statue as a child.
Hmm.
And it was the summer of 2020 that just sort of got me thinking about these statues differently and what they really represented. And I actually did have a conversation between Tripp and Simmons at the base of the Calhoun statue on Calhoun Street. But the Calhoun statue, over the course of editing, was since moved.
Right.
And then it was a question of how much I wanted to dig into that very heavy uh, history. And it was kind of tricky because I wanted to introduce the concepts or make readers aware of the art that's around that some
Hmm.
people couldn't have good reason to find oppressive. But I had to be careful by introducing them so much that you might think that the main character would satisfy that, would do something about it. And
Right.
so that was fine line to cross, and I hope I did a good job of it. Those the paintings like in the Battery Hall, those are actually in one of those men's clubs, and I was like, I'm just going to write about this
Mm.
because I don't know how many people would know about that. But yeah, it was they are there, and I think I don't know. I to write about my city and what I see, it just that was just a part of it that I wanted to be sure to include.
Right. So Pat says, "Hi, Gervais. I really enjoyed reading your new book. There were great family dynamics, and it was interesting seeing Simmons mature and find her own passions, but still realizing how important family is. Having lived in Charleston for a while, I also loved being able to picture so many things and places in the story." Here's her question.
Mhm.
Many, and you alluded to this a few moments ago, many
Okay.
readers want only a main character they love, which I don't get. I like a variety. Simmons is not a character I liked at first.
Mhm.
Many times I disliked her choices, but of course I ended up admiring what she worked through by the end. Did it concern you at all that readers might not like the story because of, I guess, who she was in the beginning?
Yeah, that's really tricky. Please, I'm so thankful that she finished reading the book and stuck with it, you know? um, I what's funny to me as a writer is that I'm so absorbed in my characters that I can't see how other people see them.
Right,
And like yeah, I guess I was alluding to earlier being like self-absorbed and whatnot. And so I think I have such an impulse to make them complex that I might start off with the things like complexity means bad, you know, and it doesn't always. And so I'm a newbie, and I want to hopefully I can walk that line better where you would pull for them in the beginning, but also know that they are not perfect.
right,
So my answer to that is I don't know. I hope I can do that better because at some point, I mean, you've only got the reader at the beginning, and then they can
right.
always put it down in like the DNF that did not finish. Ugh, you know.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm always going to try to be working toward that. That's such a good question.
It's a hard line to walk because you want the character to be interesting
Hmm.
and to have a story. And perfect people are often boring. So you need the character to be interesting, but likable, so that, as you say, you don't end up with a book that's not finished. But clearly, everyone that I know at least has finished your book and loved it. So
Oh,
you don't
okay.
have this problem. But it is a fine line for everyone to try to walk, I think. Um, so. Nicole Knight says, "I love this book. This was so timely for me as I'm starting a new job at 50. Please relate to the author that the brave was and is so pertinent to me." So
Oh,
your book really touched her, and she wanted to let you know. She
oh,
didn't really, well, she has a question, but like 18 people asked this question, and it's the one I'm going to ask you at the end. But we haven't quite gotten there yet.
okay.
So let's see. Sarah and Rebecca also would like for you to describe your writing process.
Okay. Well, this one, this is how I do it. Is I go through a sprint and maybe I try to hit like 35,000 words. And so I say I have 7 weeks to do that. So that's 1,000 words a day. And my book was like 85,000 words, just to give an example. So I do 1,000 words a day, Monday through Friday. And then if I don't hit 5,000 by Friday, I make myself work over the weekend. So I really do treat it like a job. I'm disciplined. I know how lucky I am that I got this book picked up. And so, I'm really, really trying to do it again for this next one. So that is what I do. My kids, they're in school until 2:15. And so at 8 o'clock, I'm at my office and I'm drinking my coffee and I'm writing, writing, writing. And I'm fine. I can get a whole lot more writing than like 4 hours of it. I mean, I leave, I piddle, I go do something, and then I write, but just and I'm not a plotter. I'm a pantser. How about you? What are you?
I am such a plotter. I start with a spreadsheet. I mean, it's like
Wow.
I have to know. I have everything. I start with the idea, who did what to who and why,
Right.
and how are my characters going to kind of evolve during the story. And then I have a
Yeah.
spreadsheet with like one line for every chapter before I even start, because otherwise I go off on these tangents and these wild imaginings, and I end up with things that are not relevant at all to the book, to the story I'm trying to tell. And it's just so much stuff I have to delete. So I'm very non-productive if I don't plot.
Well, I would say I'm very non-productive. I'm constantly going on tangents and I have to throw stuff away all of the time. So maybe I really need to know how to plot. I tried it, but I couldn't. I just didn't know. I just didn't know what it was going to turn out to be.
You know,
So,
I did not really plot the first book. I kind
uh-huh.
of learned on the first book, and I
Really?
think I figured out by book 2 that I needed to be a plotter. But I
Yeah.
think, and some people maybe that happens for, they kind of,
Yeah.
their process kind of evolves, and I think
Right.
everybody's process evolves. But some people I think are just pantsers, and they're going to be pantsers because that's the way their creative process works, you know,
Yeah.
and if that's what works for you, I say don't fight it. You know, but I
Well,
can't do it. I have to have that structure, or else I just uh, it ends up being ugly.
yeah, well, I'll tell you, I mean, it gets pretty ugly around here. But I mean, so I've got about 300 pages of this next book, and I have thrown away just as many pages easily,
Wow.
easily. But someone likened it to like driving, and you can only see as far as like your teeny little dim lights, through the floor. I mean, that's how it is. And then only about two-thirds the way through writing this book did I like just the characters crystallize more and more and more. I mean, I even just not too long ago realized that this character that was a man had to be a woman because of this dynamic. There was a power dynamic, and
Mhm.
I wanted to remove the possible sexuality from the power dynamic. And so, like, I was like 250 pages in, and then I had to change Todrick to Lulu, and that's the only way I got there. I'm just so interested in like how different your process is, and mine is like dook, 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 dook. I mean, I'm just like all over the place, and I would love to get to the point. But I mean, you're much more advanced, and how many you've done and the
You
success
know
you've
what?
had.
Every book is a new adventure. I mean,
Yeah.
it's starting over at the beginning every time. So, you know, I don't think this ever gets to where, at least for me, I can't imagine ever getting to the point where I kind of take the process for granted, or,
Mm.
you know, I mean, it's always going to be sort of an evolution for me, I think, and every book is a new adventure. But yeah, no, I'd love to talk with you about that. We can chat and whatever.
I would love
Maybe we'll have
any help.
coffee.
Yeah, sure. Yes. Yes. Come over. I'm right downtown near the Citadel. I'll take
Oh,
you out. I'll take you to my favorite little shop.
that sounds wonderful. We'll do that. Um, okay, so the question that a lot of people asked in different ways, and we sort of were approaching it with this last question, what about what you're working on now,
Uh,
is there more for Simmons? Is she in your next book? Is this a new character? Tell us about the book you're working on and your plans for Simmons, if that's not the same thing.
So I've been so touched that people want to hear what happens next, and it didn't occur to me to include her in the next. Like it just didn't occur. I just started writing the next one before this one came out. I think my third book, though, I might include her. Maybe more peripheral, not as a central character, but some that you might catch going by,
Mhm.
and include the characters that I'm working on now. So this book, I'm a lot better explaining, like, after, 4 or 6 months of that book being of Impolite Company being out, I can talk about it, and I'm sure you might feel the same way, but, like, in the beginning, I'm like, "I don't even know, like, what am I doing?" But this book, I found this is a way to explain it, and bear with me, it might take a little bit, but, there are 4 main characters. It's based out on Wadmalaw. If it's not
Mhm.
Wadmalaw Island, it'll at least be a fictional island, a barrier island, and I was with some girlfriends a couple years ago, and we were walking around Guatemala, and I saw this house in just the way the fall light hit these oak trees around it, and it was just like lighting these trees on this like gold fire on the tree. And then around this house were these just ancient camellias, and it was just beautiful, like southern kind of mansion, but it wasn't huge, but it was beautiful. Anyway, so I was like, I want to set a house, I want to set a story in a place like this. And then I was thinking about my characters, and one is Alida, and her main, I guess, the constraint or the way I box her in is the secrets we keep from people we love to protect them.
Mhm.
So that is her main motivation. She has a secret, and you're not going to know it until the end. but I'm sure we all have somebody that we love in our lives, and we know something about them, and they might run up against us, say something kind of snarky, and if we revealed what we knew, it would shut them up in a second. But we love them so much, we're just not going to say that. And so that's Alida. So she's sort of the matriarch. There is Rhett, and she is my age. She's been married for a decade, and there's my sisters and I joke that like when you have really little kids, you're in the monkey room. I mean, it's just crazy with little children. You're just in the monkey room. But like after your children hit a certain age, like 5 or 6 or something, you kind of like see beyond the fray, and you're like, what else is out there? Like are kind of there are other men who are attractive. Like, what is that about? Like what is marriage? Like it was just so focused on like the wedding and being together and then having the children. All of a sudden you have a space to breathe, and there might be a little more introspection, and you're kind of investigating things that you hadn't planned on investigating. So that's Rhett. The third character is Hannah. Hannah is going through a big change in her life. She had worked so hard. She's from Indiana. She comes from a simple background, and she worked so hard to become a director in a luxury marketing company in New York. And she realizes pretty much at the start of the novel, I hate my job. Like I spent my whole life going for this thing, and it feels soulless. It feels fake. And through a series of events, she also ends up back at this mansion off Guatemala. And the fourth character is Cole, short for Coleman. I was actually trying to figure out a Southern name for this character. I'm like, what is it going to be? And I was driving to Mount Pleasant, and it was Coleman Boulevard. And I was like, Coleman it is. And he's a Citadel cadet. And I spent about a decade at the Citadel, but 6.5 years teaching, and I loved it. I mean, I even got to wear a uniform and was saluted. I mean, it was a power trip. Oh, it was great. I had my shoulder boards, beret. But I was really, I loved that population. I found it, I learned so much. I don't come from a military family. I don't have that background. And I was particularly interested in the young women there. They're about 8% female in that. And the Citadel cadet, the one that, I see the world through his eyes. I mean, it's a male, but I want to make a commentary on life as a woman there. And I just think, so I think it's a really fun novel. I like to think it's a little sophisticated, a little grown up, a little sexy, hopefully publishable. And that's where I am right now, but I'm having a ball. I love it. And it's fun as the characters are revealed to me. What, who are these people? Where are they coming from?
What's their story?
What's their story? So yeah, so that's it. That's a very long answer. I don't have a pitch line yet. If you can come up with one after all of that, let me know.
I'll sleep on it.
Okay.
It sounds fun. And I love books that have different perspectives. And so are you writing it from each of their different perspectives, or do you have one like main character? Like
I'm writing it from
Simmons?
their different perspectives. And the fun thing is, so my editor is Dorothea Benton Frank's editor, and she was such like a larger than life character in town, and I was so lucky to get to know her, not closely, but my parents knew her, and the last time I saw her was at a party, and I was thinking about this next book, and I didn't have my first book, and wasn't being picked up yet or anything like that. But I'd asked her, I said, I'm writing this next book. Should I keep it first person or do multiple characters? And she says, oh, definitely multiple characters. That way they can keep secrets from each other. Like, okay. So anyway, it's kind of fun that there's, that was her advice, and I definitely did it.
Interesting. I'll have to give that some thought. Oh, of course, I love her books and everything she's ever written. And, as you say, larger than life character. But that's an interesting perspective. And many of her books, I think, are, well, you know what? I don't want to. I started to like do a category of, okay, what have I read of hers that was multiple
Right.
points of view versus a single points of view, and I think she did it both ways. But I think she can do anything. But anyway,
Yeah.
okay, I think that is all of the questions that we have. Is there anything else that you want to tell us? Anything else we should know that we haven't asked you?
Um, well, I'll just take this moment to just say thank you so much for picking my book. Thank you all for
Oh,
picking it up. I'm just really enjoyed it. I think the questions were just lovely and insightful and interesting, and I'm really excited to hear if y'all have any more questions on Facebook. I'll definitely go on there. I mean, I'm always like, does anybody want to talk? So
and they will, I promise you. And we'll post this uh, Thursday morning in the group. So after that, if anybody has questions, they'll tag you,
okay.
and you can just chat, as you like.
Yeah.
So this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for doing this. It's been a pleasure to have you. It's lovely to meet you. I certainly enjoyed your book, and thank you for writing another story for us.
Oh, well, it's the pleasure's been all mine for sure. And let me know when you come to Charleston.
I'll do that. Thanks so much.
Thank
Take
you so
care,
much.
Gervais.
Okay, bye.
Bye bye.